So the Odessa Review is an English language magazine of culture and policy that we launched about a year and a half ago. So it's kind of a beautiful, beautifully produced curio object. It's a high modernist, late modernist, 1930s style partisan review, almost a little magazine as we call it in the States. I'm an American. I grew up in the States. We're interested in really discussing the cultural implications of the new Ukraine. We're really interested in looking at what the outcome is of the last couple of years of ferment, culturally, politically, socially.
So the latest issue is dedicated to Ukrainian Jewish relations.
Yeah.
Where did this idea come from, and what are some of the highlights of this issue, you would say?
So I'm really proud of this issue. We've been working on it for a long time with our friends and partners in the Ukrainian Jewish Encounter. And, you know, it's an extraordinarily important issue, first of all, to me, because I am the grandson of Ukrainian Jews. Both my grandparents, two of my grandparents were born in Ukraine, in Chernivtsi and Khatinsk. The other thing is that I made my way in American journalism in a few things. I was a book reviewer, and I did other sorts of long-form journalism, quote-unquote long-form. And so I was always reporting on the Ukrainian Jewish relationship, which is extraordinarily interesting, extraordinarily important also, because it's a microcosm of lots of issues having to do with history and ideology and the construction of a nation-state.
Yeah, and like, what would you say are the highlights of this specific issue?
That last part, yeah. So I think it's a really, really, really special issue, and we worked on it very hard. We have 4 or 5 pieces, I think, in it, which are world-class, really excellent. We have something by Timothy Snyder. He gave a speech in the Bundestag about Germany's relationship to the Ukrainian state and Germany's relationship to Ukrainian memory. That's a very special thing. We have a very interesting article by Shimon Redlich, a Holocaust survivor and one of the great experts on the Holocaust, and it's about his relationship to the legacy of Sheptytsky. So that's a fantastic piece. We have a really good piece by a really interesting American-Israeli scholar by the name of Olga Gershenson. She wrote the seminal book in 2013 on the Holocaust in Soviet film. There's like 40 articles in this issue, and they're all really good. Some are better than others, but they're really good.
Okay, so you've spoken a lot about Ukrainian Jewish relations already, but what would you say were like the biggest challenges over like the last years?
Well, so Ukrainian Jewish history is actually 1,000 years long. People don't know this, but Ukraine, or the lands that make up contemporary Ukraine, constitutes the cradle of Ashkenazi Jewish civilization. 95% of the world's Ashkenazi Jews, European Jews, probably can trace their lineage to one place or another that is in contemporary Ukrainian territory, or right next to it, maybe a little bit on the side of Belarus or on the other side of Poland. But you know, this is the cradle of Jewish civilization. I think the biggest challenges for the Ukrainian Jewish community, as they are for the Ukrainian community in terms of safety, is being the Donbass. I think the Jews, I think the Jewish community of Donbass, and it's a tragedy. Lugansk and Donetsk had a lot of Jews, and these are important cities historically for Jews and Ukrainians. I think the Jewish community of Donbass had to leave for obvious reasons. I think mutual recognition is still important. There, especially in 3rd and 4th generation diaspora in Canada and America, both ethnic Ukrainians and ethnic Jews have a lot of really bad stereotypes about each other. I think I spent a lot of my time explaining to my fellow Americans in the Jewish community that Ukrainians are not all pogromists and anti-Semites, and I think my counterparts in the Ukrainian Canadian community also have to explain to their counterparts that not all Jews are communist commissars, right? These are really malicious stereotypes and cliches that don't do anything for relationship. So are there other problems? You know, there are really no issues with being a Jew in Ukraine, just like there are no issues of being an ethnic Russian in Kiev or Crimean Tatar or in Lviv. You know, it's a very tolerant country. It's a model for post-Soviet decommunization. This country. So that's why I live here.
That's nice.
Yeah.
So would you say that Ukrainian Jewish relations changed a lot, like since 2014?
In this issue, I have a couple of articles dealing with that. First of all, we reprinted Vitaly Portnikov's famous essay from March 9th or 10th of 2014, a week after the Maidan. He penned this article saying that this basically shows that you know Ukrainian Jews are part of the birth of the Ukrainian political nation. You know, there's something to say about the fact that many Jews here of post-Soviet culture were Russian speakers, and one reason for that is that simply the Jews of Bukovina, the Jews of Chernowitz were wiped out. Right, there were 140,000 Jews in Lviv before the Nazis got there. Right, there were 11 after the Nazis were kicked out of Lviv. Right, Hitler destroyed internally the demographics of the balance between Ukrainian and Russian-speaking Jews. I mean, simply because of pressure for Soviet integration, Soviet assimilation. Some Ukrainians thought that Jews made a decision to become Russian speakers, but it's not quite the case. The reason I'm talking about that is that Portnikov made a case in March 2014 that the Ukrainian Jews were now becoming full-fledged members of the Ukrainian political nation, right? And that's the answer to your question. Part of, you know, this is one facet of decommunization and the floating apart or the evolution in different directions of the Russian and the Ukrainian state, right? The Russian state had total capture of the Ukrainian state, and now because of real independence and the collapse of interdependence, right? Russians and Ukrainians, these are two different nations slowly evolving in different directions. Because Ukrainian Jews are becoming more Ukrainian, like everybody else in this country, whatever that might mean, they're evolving in different directions from the Russians and the Russian Jews. And so that's what happened in 2014. That's the new thing that happened.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
That's a natural process. That is a natural process. You should be a patriot of the state you have a passport from, right? I mean, unless you're an anarchist, which is a viable operative. Yeah, so it's a good thing. Yes, it's a good thing that the Ukrainian political nation is growing and evolving and integrating all sorts of minorities in a productive way. Yes, it's a good thing.
So what do you think the future holds for these relations?
I think one of the really interesting things about contemporary Ukrainian even nationalism, and in a war situation people become nationalistic, and there's a war going on, obviously. The fact that Ukrainian nationalism, which does exist, there's not as much of it as there's, like, let's say, in France now, or in England, or in Belgium, or wherever. This is not a country that has tremendous issues with jingoism. It's tremendous that 4 years after the Maidan, almost, I think, like, if we were like, I can name other countries, many other countries in the world where there would be a lot more tribal, ethnic conflicts within the society than there are here now. It's extraordinarily impressive that the Ukrainians are as tolerant as they are in a bad situation.